Well, first of all, we're talking about what we are seeing in the marketplace. And what we're seeing in the marketplace is that those traditional themes of being difficult to attract and retain and bring talent on board is definitely still here. It is not going away. It is something that's been in place for many, many years. But what's actually happening now is that the global economic growth is happening so rapidly now that there is a land shift to what it was, say, 5 years ago. In 2008, particularly after the global financial crisis, what had happened was it was firmly in the hands of the employer what they would do. That pendulum has swung back dramatically now to the employee, and they actually have choice now about where do they want to work and what do they want to do. It's very important for you to understand that. It's shifted now from cost control to now something which I would say is more around retention and engagement. And the way that people are looking at this in organisations, particularly from an HR function, is around technology. We've heard technology a lot today, but the reason for that is because it's the #1 enabler in the workplace today. And you can read anything by Dave Ulrich, who's, if you're not familiar with his work, he's a very, very famous HR academic. You need to understand how technology impacts the HR organisation because it's the #1 way that you're going to get to know your business and another way, thoroughfare for you to do that. We heard before from Eric and also Andre around data and how important that is, and it was really great to hear. Thank you very much. But what we're really hearing from data, data is HR's currency going forward. It is your currency. If you do not have data analytics in your sphere of influence, you are going to be measured as HR practitioners on 2 things. #1, how well you're liked. Okay? No matter what you do, you'll measure on how well you're liked by your CEO or by your business partners and things of this nature. That's all very well and good. I would suggest it's a very poor business result in terms of measurement. The second area is that you will be measured on how fast you respond on any given issue related to people. These 2 things, again, are good in and of themselves, but if that's what you're measuring your HR effectiveness on, and most of us are, to be very transparent, then I suggest that you're not as aligned to the business as what you think. The thing is that the numbers do tell a story, and it's terrific to see that it's been recognised here by our earlier speakers, that the Philippines has a tremendous opportunity when it comes to analytics and really being at the front of the world when it comes to that particular area. Now, here's something that you may have seen before. We've all talked about the war for talent, probably too much. Let me declare it today. The war for talent is over. And the reason for that is because talent won. Talent won the war for talent. We are now in the post-war for talent is what I would call it. So for example, for the first time in more than 5 years, employees are in charge. So we've gone through the restructures, we've gone through redundancies and the right sizing and so on, and now we're really looking at how do we really make sure that that power shift has shifted in a way that high performing employees will start to exert that control. What you're going to see more and more about in the next 12 months, and it's already happening already, is people willing to shift more readily than what they were perhaps 2 or 3 years ago. And also companies that can't attract and engage that millennial workforce, i.e. the younger workforces coming through, will lose out. And we heard some commentary before about what different generational differences are in the workplace and how they exist. And SuccessFactors has done some interesting research on that, and some of the generalisations that have been made or the perceptions about millennials or Generation Y may not necessarily be as accurate as what you think. For example, when we did some research approximately 12 months ago, we found that Generation X actually is more likely to ask for the higher title, more likely to ask for more pay, and more likely to jump ship. Okay? Younger generations are more likely to look for things like, guess what? Learning and development opportunities. They're looking for an opportunity not necessarily to go up the traditional pyramidal structure. They're looking for experiences. We're working in a basis now around what can you do multifaceted across the organisation. And you can see this not just at the entry level of the organisation, you can see this now at the top of organisations. I have worked in organisations where the head of HR has had no HR background whatsoever. They've come from a finance background, or they've come from, say, an engineering background. Does it matter? Well, actually, when you get to that stage of a company, it doesn't, because what you're actually doing is you're being hired to manage and get jobs done through people versus actually understanding the technical expertise of the role. You can put some great people around you who have that expertise and that knowledge, but ultimately what they're getting paid for is because they have the ability to get work done through people irrespective of function, and that's why executives get paid so much. So the idea of people not necessarily adhering to certain generational differences is absolutely well and true there. So as an HR organisation, you're going to have to find ways to innovate and stay ahead. So what does this mean? We spoke a little bit before around digital technology, and it's continuing to evolve, and it's evolving at breakneck speed, and it's going to continue to permeate every single part of our digital lives, both from a personal perspective, also from a family perspective, and also at work. And as digital technology is coming more and more into play, and this is important for you to recognise as an HR practitioner, the days of HR being a centralised function, being the control and command area of an organisation, those days are numbered. What we're going to see with the enterprise software area, i.e. HR software, you're going to see a more consumerisation of that field. So for example, solutions that are more easy to use and more able to be used by people who aren't just necessarily in that HR function. It's going to be more embedded in the day-to-day management of people. So the idea of HR being the command and control centre of all HR and talent-related data is limited. You're going to see more and more of that information being sent out or being able to be accessed with the right permission levels of people in the business. So don't think HR is not there ready to be disrupted. We are not immune from that, okay? You may have heard from other industries who think that this sort of change will never happen to them, or that role will always be there. The reality is that things are changing, and data is going to be the currency of HR going forward. It's going to disrupt HR, and it's going to define the future of HR. I would suggest that there are 5 areas that we'll need to think about when it comes to HR and the future of practitioners in this room. Number 1, data and integration will be king, or queen. It will be absolutely number 1. Data will be number 1 when it comes to HR. Secondly, digital will give power to the people. They will have access to this information, and they will actually have the ability to manage these things through the people. I'm not talking about the traditional of self-service or managed self-service and ESS and so on. I'm talking about data and technology being so readily available and easy to use that it's going to be in the power of the people in terms of managers. Consumer and the day-to-day applications that you use outside of work are going to enter your workplace. They're entering now, but it's going to continue to happen. And also, I would suggest that cloud computing is going to enable that sort of transition to happen and happen quickly. So this is a slide of from a movie called Moneyball. Who's seen a movie called Moneyball? Hands up. Okay, a couple of you. There's a reason I put Brad Pitt so small in the corner there, because I just didn't want to distract some people in the audience versus myself. I'm certainly not going to challenge this man as the most wonderful, good-looking man alive. I should have perhaps put Jonah Hill up there. Maybe that would have been a better comparison, who was his co-star in this film. Anyway, what this movie is about is around baseball, and baseball is all around statistics. And statistically, this is a great story to illustrate that, and you can go home and tell your significant other, if you're interested in Brad Pitt, you're watching this for HR purposes only and how this matters to talent analytics. Well, this story is about 2 major American baseball teams, number 1 being the New York Yankees, the other one being the Oakland A's. And there's a very big difference when it comes to these 2 organisations in terms of payroll. The New York Yankees had $112 million per year to spend on their talent to attract people to their hugely successful franchise. The Oakland Athletics had a very different story. They had a budget of $38 million. What had happened though is that their coach, Billy Beane, played by Mr. Pitt here on my left, he used the idea of analytics in the sporting field to really find out who were the key people and who has the skill sets to really complement their team. They didn't have the budget and they didn't have the resources to go through and hire those big names people, but what they did have, they had analytical data to show them which specific lesser known players may be functionally well expertised, and they could hire them at a much lower price. So they built a great team around skill sets versus going out there and hiring the big names. And this team went on the longest winning streak in baseball history, winning close to 14 games in a row, nearly winning the whole playoffs and beating the New York Yankees in the early 2000s. So it's a great story. I want you to check it out. The reason why I'm telling you this is because there's relevance here to the HR framework and the talent basis. At the moment, and I would suggest that this is the same for many people in this room, companies have found it difficult to gather clean and accurate data when it comes to talent. There's a lot of information out there, but if it's in the same frame of reference or if it's in one source of truth, it may be difficult to find. So what we're looking for in this space, over the next year or two in particular, you're going to see consolidation of this data and how to use that. And it's going to be moved from what I would say reporting basis, and we heard this before, but we're looking more for a predictive type of arrangement. So for example, what I hear quite a lot is around attrition rates, and a lot of HR in the traditional sense has this figure of, say, 15% attrition a year, and that's their measure and that's their metric. In the Philippines it might be slightly higher, as my experience, maybe 20 or 25%. But to me, when I go through and I report that the attrition rate was 15%, it means nothing. It actually means nothing. What does it mean? What is a far more valuable statistic is this. Of my top 10% in my company, and I know who they are, I lost 2%. And of the bottom 10% of my company, I lost 90% attrition. Which one's going to be more relevant to your CEOs? They're not going to be interested in an overall attrition rate. They're more interested in to understand who are they retaining from a top talent perspective versus at a lower end of the scale, or may not necessarily be there. So really think about the next step around your data and the higher level. It's just not necessarily about the one number. Try and build a trend there. So what we're seeing here also is the fact that talent analytics is just super red hot at the moment, and 60% of HR practitioners around the world right now are investing in this particular space. Again, it is HR's currency going forward. SuccessFactors was lucky enough to acquire an Australian company who'd been doing workforce analytics for 30 years. For 30 years. It came out of a small company in Brisbane in Australia via a Queensland academic, and they started doing the concept of workforce analytics back in the late 70s. So we have a product now that has workforce analytics internationally now for 30 years, or over 30 years. So that's something that we're quite proud of. And the big difference here is with that data set, it integrates and connects with other functions. So for example, finance data, it connects with sales data, it connects with other forms of information and payroll that tries and moves you away from the traditional module area. It connects a full business picture when it comes to HR and the implications to a business. The analytic space is certainly here, and those companies that are investing in that are really improving in recruiting by 2 times, leadership pipeline by 3, and the company's overall performance is increasing as well. So what does this mean for HR and our little superhero up here on our screen? Well, what I believe is that the lines between business and people management are going to become even more blurred than what they are today. I would suggest that the functional silos that you see in an HR team are going to be non-existent in a few years' time. So for example, the learning function, the recruiting function, the rewards function, the OD function, the analytics function themselves, I would suggest that traditional HR structure is slowly going to become eroded away. Why? Well, because of the sharing of data across those different fields, and because of the consumerization of technology in the space, those fields are going to be able to be shared right across the organisation. Let me give you an example. How many people who have a recruiting function actually know what the succession plan looks like in their organisation? I can suggest, and not just suggest, I can, from my own experience, when we've gone through and looked at an open vacancy, no one looked at, or at least the recruiting team, they didn't look or didn't have access to the succession plan. So understanding who was actually already involved internally right now in the company who can do that particular role is an area which is of improvement. So I'm suggesting that the boundaries and I would also say the silos in HR are going to be removed over the coming years. And I would also say that it's not going to stop there. I would say that as people spend more time on technology platforms from both a personal perspective and also from a commercial perspective, they'll leave a larger trail of digital information that's able to be mined. And we've heard some examples earlier today of that. So for example, a very prominent organisation, you may have heard of it, it's an organisation called Google. They've gone through and determined that qualitative analysis that takes the ability to take initiative in the workplace is better found from data mining of social patterns versus that of an academic record. So this is actually happening today. So if you're thinking that analytics is not real and it's not necessarily there, again, this is your currency as an HR practitioner going forward to buy into the business. Going forward and being the person that's liked and responds to any given issue, because that's what traditionally HR has done, is not going to be the way forward. We heard before around how the importance of analytics and also what sort of stories can be built. Well, for example, there's a mining organisation that I've been working with in a certain part of Asia Pacific, and they thought they could go through and recruit a whole bunch of new recruits from universities to fill a specific skill set. The reality is that I thought, great, let's go have a look at some data around that. They were looking to hire around 600 fresh graduates for a particular mining engineering function to fill this particular void in this organisation. When we went through and looked at the local universities that are near that organisation to fill that void, we found that there's only going to be 150 people graduating. So there's going to be a gap there straight away. So what do you think that means? Well, that's going to make a huge difference to whether the company is going to be going in the next year or two, and it's certainly going to take the attention of the CEO who can't fill those positions. So really having an understanding of what sort of talent is out there and using the analytics available to make sure that it can happen. Also, I would suggest that there will be more predictive analysis moving from historical to one which is forward-looking, and this is the area which I think that HR does need to improve upon, is that they need to develop robust analytical skill. It is the #1 area for you to improve as an HR practitioner. You need to learn the language of the business as well, and we hear words about HR business partner a lot, and we hear a lot about the vernacular of it's business aligned and so on, but what does that really mean other than just a nice word? The way you're going to do it is by A, going into the business yourself, taking a line manager role or learning that particular job so you understand what it's like to carry the bag, or you go out there and learn data so you can realise that information in front of those decision makers. Again, when we're talking about the lines being blurred in an HR function and also from a business perspective, you're going to see these informations being blended as well. So what's going to happen is that talent management practices are going to become more integrated with the business, and what I mean by that, it's going to be even deeper because they're going to be given technology that's easy for them to use and easy for them to access. It's happening now, and it's certainly going to make it difficult for HR practitioners if they don't know how to release that information and work at a generally strategic level and determine what that looks like. Also, one of the things as technology develops, the blending between HR and IT, I think, is also an area where we're going to see some changes. So, for example, with the idea of intuitive user interfaces and that movement making it easier for people to access, employees will be more inclined to adopt those IT processes themselves. I also suggest that technology is going to break down learning content. It's also going to break down performance appraisal criteria and even break it down into smaller chunks. We heard Andre talk before around video and what power and influence that has in the organisation. Well, it has a huge impact. For example, now we can see video job descriptions. Who wants to see the traditional Word document with roles and responsibilities? Wouldn't you rather hear from a person who's doing the job right now and talking about their experience on YouTube and then going through and saying, this is what happens, what it's like to work at company A, B and C, and this is what typically happens in a day-to-day job. These are the sorts of things that are happening now, and the influence of video and so on is certainly going to be something that HR practitioners are going to have to compete with. The days of the transactional HR are gone. One of the other great things that I think is certainly going to happen is with the advent of cloud, and with that, companies can now update and introduce the latest innovations every 3 to 6 months versus every 3 to 4 years. And also with that, platform as a service, the idea of actually enabling HR practitioners to work with IT to build specific functions and platforms that are unique to their organisation will and does happen. So I suggest that's the next step after software as a service, where you'll be able to go through and source and create those informations yourself. So what does this mean for the future of HR? Well, first of all, no technology is going to take the place of effective HR management, period. It's not going to, it can't. Just as a Salesforce.com is not going to take the place of an effective sales leadership. It's not. It just can't. It doesn't work like that. Although if you listen to Steve Wozniak, the former, I guess, creative director of Apple, he suggests that's the next platform that we'll be looking at in terms of giving computers the ability to foresee and build, but that's a long, long way away. So I'm saying the HR role is here. It's absolutely here to stay. It's just going to be different and we have to reskill. Otherwise, we are going to become, unfortunately, redundant. So while I agree the term HR and human resources is an old-fashioned term, the need for it is greater than ever. If you look at some recent research from Deloitte and who they've interviewed in terms of CEOs, human capital and talent are the number one issues on the minds of those particular executive leaders. The number one issue. So I would say that businesses today are constrained by their own ability to hire and develop their own staff, and coupled with a growing lack of technical and professional skills in the marketplace. And can line managers fix this themselves? I would suggest not. I think they need dedicated specialist HR practitioners, like those people in the room, to help them alongside that. Despite the need for a tremendous reskilling of the HR workforce in terms of analytical data and also numerical data, they can solve the biggest challenges in the business. How many people who are from an HR background could feel confident in going through and explaining the quarterly results of the business that they support? How many people here could actually explain a balance sheet when it comes to their organisation and what it means from a talent perspective? There are very few HR practitioners who can do that. And I'm not saying that to frighten you, I'm saying that to encourage you and equip you for the next step when it comes to HR. You need to become more financially literate, you need to be able to use data as your currency, and you need to be able to become more business aligned, even going into the businesses you support, because it's going to give you extra credibility as an HR practitioner. I would also say that HR needs to operate more as a marketing function. I would say that HR should become part of marketing. I would say that recruiting is already there. Why? Well, recruiters are all about, they're all about marketing, they're all about brand management, it's all about trying to attract people to your organisation. Many people would say that HR and recruiting is already separate now, and I remember some of the challenges that I had as an HR leader when you went through and recruited somebody, and HR teams and recruiting teams may not necessarily see things eye to eye. So I'm saying that HR is going to have to think more as a marketeering organisation than that of an HR one. So we're going to have to become more employee-centric, just as our marketing has become more customer-centric. So I'm going to say that there's going to be new activities and new roles that is going to come into the HR space, particularly around mining data and also new organisational models that's going to help integration of that technology so people can enable the workforce. I would also say that the HR function is going to become very closer to the IT function, and a lot of the responsibilities that you hold as HR leaders are going to be dedicated to that of line managers to be accountable for. Again, not in a shared services type fashion where they go self-service, but in a way that the information is now accessible to them in a way that's easy for them to use and is meaningful to them. I would also say that, yeah, HR could be more strategic and more efficient. I think that's fair to say. And that's where we need to improve upon in the next year. Only 4% of HR organisations right now do any form of predictive analysis worldwide. 4%. So that's a huge opportunity for the Philippines and also for the HR practitioner as well. I'd fact to say that any single organisation that is very successful in the world does have a world-class HR platform in place and practice in place. It does. So the HR practitioner is not going away, it just needs to reskill itself because in time it runs the risk of becoming disrupted like many other parts of the organisation. So the impact from the business, there's 4 real areas when it comes to the future of HR and what that means. So for example, the locus of information and decision making will shift to employees and away from a central group. So the idea of HR being the be-all and end-all holding this information is soon to be eroded. It will be given to the hands of the managers and it will be given to the hands of the employees to manage. Digital technology will knock down those silos that you've seen in the workplace, not only within the HR function, but also between the HR and the business. Those informations are definitely going to be seen by the organisation that you support, and they're going to be empowered to make those changes. Talent management processes will better serve the business. Yeah, that may be seen as a given, you may think that, but the reason why this is happening is because they're customised to an organisation's changing needs, and they are more likely to be adaptable and usable by the line manager. The number one barrier when it comes to HR right now is usability. And with the advent of cloud and with the advent of these HR technologies, line managers are more likely to use it just in the way that they use Facebook and Twitter and so on. And also I would say that talent practices are going to become more integral to the business strategic capability. What I mean by that is, by you not just reporting what's happening every month, like a headcount report or a time to fill or things of this nature, which are interesting in and of themselves, talking about what happens from 6 months from here and 12 months from here, this data illustrates that this change is expected. What are we doing as a business to be ready for that change? That is what's going to happen, and that's going to be impact for the business. So think about data-driven decisions and the technologies that are available out there. Impact on HR. There is going to be impact in these three areas because of technology as one, but also because of ourselves as HR practitioners. The function will change as digital more efficiently enables transactional processes and line managers to use the solutions themselves. So what we're going to see is more project-orientated HR. So for example, merger and acquisitions is going to become very important. Certain projects that align to a growth area within the organisation. So HR project specialists are certainly going to be something that you're going to see more about versus the traditional HR business partner or generalist. Also, HR is going to start acting more as a marketing organisation. Those core activities of the HR group that you traditionally used to see is going to go away. And you're going to see that branding and educating employees about talent processes is going to become more and more important. And also, the line between HR information management and the technology roles is going to continue to blend. So the idea of building interfaces between IT and HR as their own data and systems come together is something that you're going to be able to realise. And I would also say that at some point HR professionals may actually configure the software themselves instead of IT experts. Because the solutions are being built so readily and so easily these days, these sorts of things are going to be put in the hands of HR practitioners to build because they have the need to do it. And because software is being built in such a way that's enabling people to do it, it will be easier for them to access this and build something that's meaningful for their employees and also meaningful for their organisation. So, in closing, I would say that there are some terrific analytic programs out there at the moment, and I would suggest that you as a HR practitioner start thinking about what does it mean to understand data as your currency going forward for you to preserve your role as an HR practitioner in the business going forward. It's not just about being business aligned, it's about understanding the currency and using that information in a way that's going to help the HR organisation go forward. If you want to contact me, you can do so by just reaching out to me on Twitter at the screen at the bottom of the page there. I'd be more than happy to connect with you and be inspired in terms of where HR is going. For the first time in what I believe is HR's history, you have the tools and the technology and the ability to stand toe-to-toe with the Chief Marketing Officer, with the Chief Executive Officer, with the Chief Finance Officer, because you have the information at your fingertips. Before now, you never really had that data. It was difficult and disparate to find. But those days are finished and the information is there, it's ready for you to access, and I would suggest that you need to think about your HR technology journey to help you enable yourself with the businesses that you support. Thank you very much for your time.